Dr. Soania Mathur is a retired family physician living outside of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. She was diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's disease at the age of 28. And 12 years later, she resigned her medical practice to devote herself full time to helping those living with Parkinson's. Today, she is a dedicated and internationally known speaker, writer, educator, and Parkinson's advocate. She serves as co-chair for the Patient Council of the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research, and is also a member of the Executive Science Advisory Board at the Fox Foundation. She also devotes herself to membership on the board of directors of the Davis Phinney Foundation, is part of the editorial board for the Journal of Parkinson's Disease, and serves on the Brian Grant Foundation Advisory Board as well. Dr. Mathur has valued her involvement with the World Parkinson's Congress as both a speaker and committee member, and was awarded the World Parkinson's Coalition Award for Distinguished Contribution to the Parkinson's Community at the World Parkinson's Congress in 2019. She was also privileged to be recognized in 2020 by receiving the Allan Humanitarian Award for her work in the PD community. Locally, she is a member of the board of directors for the Lake Ridge Health Foundation and also sits on the patient advisory board for the Toronto Western Hospital Movement Disorder Clinic, where she chairs the research committee. Soania is a very active writer as well. She's the author of 2 books, My Grandpa's Shaky Hands and Shaky Hands, A Kid's Guide to Parkinson's Disease, and all proceeds from the sales of these books are donated to support Parkinson's research and other efforts that serve the PD community. If that were not enough, Soania has a terrific blog, Unshakeable MD, on which she writes regularly about her experiences with Parkinson's and provides education on many Parkinson's-related topics. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome to PDWise Dr. Soania Mathur.
Allan, it's a pleasure to be here.
I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. Thank you for being here. So, as I said in my introductory remarks, you were diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's at the age of 28. Tell us how that came about, how the diagnosis happened, what was going on in your life.
Yeah, it wasn't the most convenient time of life. I will say that. I was 28 years old, as you mentioned. I had just finished my residency in family medicine and was expecting my first child when I noticed a tremor in my right pinky finger. And it was intermittent at first, more of an annoyance and actually a little bit medically intriguing because I thought, oh, this is what a tremor feels like. You know, I've heard patients describe it, never experienced it. But then it became a little bit more constant and a little more noticeable to the point where my husband noticed it. And he's also a physician. And he said, you know, it's probably nothing, but you got to go get that checked out. And I did. I relented, even though I didn't want to, because I thought it was more of a nothing sort of symptom. But I went to a neurologist at the clinic that we had just joined. And he just put me through actually a very basic test. It was on my lunch break. We didn't have much time. And he made me walk up and down the hall and do the, you know, the finger to nose thing and that sort of thing. And he said, I think you have young onset Parkinson's disease, which is very unusual, as you know. I mean, especially in young onset, that diagnosis can take quite a while. Yeah. But he sort of said it right then and there. And I, of course, said, you're wrong. It can't be possible. But I did accept his offer for a second opinion. And so he sent me to probably the top movement disorder specialist in Canada. And a couple months later, instead of sort of freeing me from this diagnosis, he confirmed it, that I had young onset Parkinson's disease at 28.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you're suggesting, you know, it's a rare diagnosis to start with. And even medically trained people, I've learned, don't always get it the first time. It takes a lot of people in our community seeing, you know, a number of people, and ultimately a movement disorder specialist is ideal, but sometimes it's hard to get to those folks immediately. But sounds like you were able to do that. So you've been living with Parkinson's for a number of years and living well. I admire your work and advocacy and education, all the things you do so much. And Parkinson's disease is different for different people, right? It's a snowflake disease. Some people say it's a sort of a spectrum disease that presents differently in different people. What's it like for you, Soania, living with Parkinson's?
You're right. I mean, we are united by certain symptoms, but we are definitely different in a lot of ways that our symptoms present and how we experience them, how they affect our life, how they affect our quality of life, how we respond to medications and that sort of thing. For me, it's been now over 22 years since I was diagnosed, and the journey changes. Day by day, it changes. Week by week, it changes. I'm certainly not what I was a year ago or 10 years ago. The symptoms are definitely progressive. They're slowly progressive in my case, which I guess I'm very grateful for, but they're nevertheless progressive. So my symptoms are motor in nature. I do have tremor dominant symptoms. I have also the dyskinesia from my medication now that I'm dealing with. I would say that it has changed in that before I could sort of go with periods where I didn't feel like I had Parkinson's disease, whereas now I'm sort of dealing more with the on and off periods that I get. And it's becoming a little harder to balance the medications versus the symptoms, because as you know, sometimes the side effects of the medications can be worse than the symptoms themselves. But, you know, I've sort of always been able to compartmentalize my Parkinson's a little bit, because when you're dealing with an illness, as you know, that sort of encompasses your body 24 hours a day, it's sometimes easy to kind of get in that mindset where you are the disease. Yeah. And I've sort of tried to compartmentalize it, that it's just part of my life, and sort of keep it confined in some ways, mentally anyway. Physically, it's obviously not easy to escape from.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're doing terrific, and I think your willingness to talk about your experience and, you know, both the opportunities that come with that, but also the daily challenges, which don't relent, right? I mean, I say to people, progressive diseases progress. That's, you know, by definition what they do.
Right.
There's some things that we can do to help slow that down. I'll ask you to talk about that here in a moment. But really, I think for a lot of us, it's about sort of the daily management or the morning management, and you see how you're doing then, and who knows what the afternoon will bring. What surprised you about living with Parkinson's these 22 years? I assume that there have been many surprises, but what are some of them?
One of the surprises I would say would be the heterogeneity in how this disease presents. I guess even when I was studying Parkinson's disease, we were kind of taught, these are the symptoms of Parkinson's. This is how you're going to diagnose patients if they have this constellation, that's Parkinson's disease. But what I've learned through these 22 years is that it's not that at all. It's such an individual disease in terms of motor symptoms and non-motor symptoms. It globally affects patients. So it's not just about, you know, someone having a tremor and having to control that. It's about, you know, controlling their mood disorder, their sleep disorder, their pain that they may have, and how that impacts their quality of life. So the heterogeneity of the disease, I think, from a medical perspective, was really quite surprising to me, because we're really not taught that, or at that time anyway, when I was in medical school, we really weren't taught that information. So I think that from a medical standpoint was the most surprising thing. From a personal standpoint, I think it was, the most surprising thing was the level of support of this community. I think that was really surprising. I didn't really think that there would be such a community that would come together to support each other and that you could turn to in your times of need. I think that was really surprising. I didn't recognize that the importance of that kind of community support.
Yeah, my friend Michael Westfall, you know, has said, and I've said this before on PDYs and other places, that, you know, having Parkinson's makes you feel uncomfortable in your own body, and I think that, to me, that captures the, you know, the motor challenges, the non-motor challenges, all the things that you're talking about, that sometimes you don't always see in a person who has Parkinson's, but nevertheless, that person may be struggling with depression or anxiety or constipation or, you know, sleep disorders, things that don't necessarily seem obvious, but are nevertheless very challenging. And like you know, one of my biggest surprises has been this extraordinary community. People living with Parkinson's, care partners, advocates, you know, people who learn more about it through our own experiences. I never would have imagined meeting the people like you and others on this journey, and that, you know, that it gives it meaning and it gives it rewards that are certainly unanticipated and really for me not imaginable.
Oh, I agree. And such inspiring people too, you know, such as yourself, but people that keep you going through their own sharing of their own stories and voices.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well said. So what do you do to take care of yourself and to manage Parkinson's? I alluded to the fact that there are some things that we can do to be proactive and use our
Right.
agency. What are some things that you do?
You know, I can tell you either what I should do or what I do.
Both are fine.
Both are fine.
Yeah.
No, I have, as of late, you know, in recent years, tried to follow what advice I give. For me, it's a lot about scheduling. You know, I think as a disease, this disease is best managed by scheduling some things in there. And that's just follow up with your physician or that sort of thing. It's about taking your medications on time, which is really, really important. It's also about scheduling self-care, and that's really, really key. And that self-care includes exercise, includes getting the right amount of sleep, it includes stress management through mindfulness or whatever other, you know, types of practice that you would like to have. It's about eating well. It's about maintaining your other health, you know, going for your regular mammograms or prostate exams, that sort of thing, making sure that you are well in other ways. It's about, you know, scheduling time with family and friends, things that give you joy. But it's really about creating a life that that allows you to control those variables that you have control over. Because a lot of this disease is about not being in control and not being able to control the way your symptoms go or how it progresses. But there are certain variables that we do have control over, and it's about taking that control and scheduling that into your daily life.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that so much. It's been my experience too. And along with that, I've discovered that, you know, if we're open about sort of the importance of scheduling, that our family and friends and colleagues around us, you know, understand that, and they,
Right.
you know, they work with us, and that's okay. That's ideally what we want. You mentioned what, you know is good to do, and then what you sometimes do. And I know a lot of physicians and people who work in the medical community, and I that's not an uncommon practice in my experience. But you know, you do have the somewhat unique experience of being a physician, and then being diagnosed. And I'm wondering how your training as a doctor influences your perspective on Parkinson's and your approach to living with PD. You know a lot more than most of us ever will know about medicine and particularly Parkinson's. How has that relationship sort of unfolded over the years?
Yeah, it's a contentious one. In the beginning, it was interesting because it actually helped me in my work, in that I started to recognize that disease were globally affecting patients, that it wasn't just about the disease itself and treating the disease and making sure the medications were directed towards what the symptoms were, but looking at the whole patient. You know, for instance, I would see Parkinson's patients and I would recognize that my 70-year-old gentleman with Parkinson's was more impacted by the fact that his constipation from the Parkinson's disease was affecting his quality of life and his ability to go out, or his anxiety was affecting his desire to communicate or socialize. And it wasn't about the tremor that I could treat very easily. It was about how his quality of life was affected, and his quality of life was very different than mine. Even when I was practicing, I would over-medicate myself in order to control the tremor because, you know, no one wants to see a shaky hand coming at them with a syringe or that sort of thing. Or if I had to do immunizations for kids or physical exams, I couldn't have my hands tremor. So I would sort of accept the side effects that I was getting in order to control the tremor. But that was for my quality of life at that time. And that would not be applied or applicable to everybody. So the whole quality of life concept really came to play in terms of how I approached patients when I was working. And but also I guess that the sort of downside of it was that I felt like I understood what was in the future. And sometimes that could be a little disconcerting. But now I recognize that, again, progression is so different from person to person that, there is no real need to fear the future because you can't predict the future. So it's helped me a lot in terms of my ability to approach my disease, in terms of medications and understanding, how to manage my medications a little bit on my own as well in between my appointments. It's given me a new perspective on how patients are treated and that kind of view of knowing how physicians approach patients sometimes and how patients really need to be approached. I think that doesn't always match. And so being an advocate for treating patients holistically and looking at their quality of life, I think has been really eye-opening to me, being a physician and a patient.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that perspective. You're very busy. I mentioned you've written a couple of books in the introductory remarks. You now have Unshakeable MD. Tell us about that initiative.
Unshakeable MD was initially I thought it would fundraise for Parkinson's research, but it's turned out more to be an educational site and a personal blog. I think that we're sort of inundated with information. It's very hard to kind of wade through all the different things that we see on the internet to come up with, trusted resources. And I wanted to sort of be a trusted resource for patients to learn more about their disease, more about their treatment options, but also learn about it from a personal perspective. Because I think, and you're definitely an example of this, sharing our stories is really a powerful way to communicate with others and have others learn from our own experiences. And so part of Unshakeable MD is that as well. So it's a bit cathartic for me because I get to share some of my personal feelings or experiences with this disease, but it's also an educational site.
Yeah, and it's really a terrific site. I read it regularly, and as you know, and I've said this before in other venues, when I was diagnosed, for about the first year, I was silent about it publicly, but you were someone I reached out to pretty early on because I found you on the internet and I read some of your writings and you were very open about your experience. And I think I've learned since then that, I'm not alone in my response. A lot of people, suffer in silence for periods of time before they're ready to be public, and they look for opportunities to connect through blogs and interpersonal relationships like you offered me. And so I really just want to underscore the value in that as people are trying to sort of figure it out, particularly, immediately after being diagnosed or the first.
Allan, I think we talked about this. I didn't tell anybody except for my husband, you, and a couple of other close friends, but not at work or my extended family or friend circle for a good 10 years post-diagnosis.
Yeah.
That kind of disclosure can take a while. So you're right. Look, we can learn from each other. And that sometimes makes us more comfortable with our own situation. Yeah,
for sure. And your experience gave me not only perspective, but hope that, one could live well for a long time and, manage this disease and reach goals and all of that. So I really appreciate that. Tell us about your work with various groups and organizations. You have a laundry list of involvement with, really important Parkinson's communities and organizations. Tell us about some of that.
It's evolved. As I mentioned, the first 10 years, I didn't do anything except kind of try and distract myself from the PD community as much as possible, try to avoid my diagnosis as much as possible. And then it got to the point where I couldn't practice anymore because I was basically driving myself into the ground in terms of fatigue and just not being able to take care of myself and work at the same time. So I thought, okay, I really want to do a lot more patient education and advocacy work, so I'll stop clinical practice and move on to that. Little did I realize that was going to probably take up more time than my clinical practice. But that having been said, it's a passion, and when you're involved with something that you're so passionate about, it doesn't seem to be a chore at all. Yeah, I'm involved with a few different organizations. I co-chair the Patient Council at the Michael J. Fox Foundation because I've been always so impressed with their ability to think outside the box when it comes to research, and their commitment to collaboration between researchers and sharing of data. I think is a really positive thing. I also am on the board of directors for Davis Finney Foundation. Again, another great organization that speaks to wellness in the PD community. I also work with an advisory board for the Brian Grant Foundation, and I work with Parkinson Canada and World Parkinson Congress, and the Toronto Western Hospital Patient Advisory Board up here, and other organizations like Cure Parkinson's and that sort of thing. We, myself and two Canadian advocates, Tim Haig and Larry Gifford, just last year started a global advocacy organization called PD Avengers.
Yes.
And that's where I'm spending a lot of my time as well, or attention now, is on PD Avengers and trying to unite basically the PD community on an advocacy level.
Yeah, PD Avengers is terrific. I appreciate that work very much too. So Soania, as you look ahead, what gives you hope on the research front or otherwise? What gives you hope?
What gives me hope is that I feel like the community is moving to a spirit of collaboration. For a long time, people were working in silos. And that led to a lot of, and still leads to a lot of duplication of efforts, a waste of resources, and most importantly, time, because time is something that we as a community don't have to waste. You know, we don't have extra time that we want to be in this state of disability or progression. But now I see a spirit of collaboration really starting, and the power of collaboration is happening now. And that really does give me hope, because if we can work together, I mean, we saw that with the pandemic and the development of the vaccines.
Right. When
When the world collaborates on an issue, a lot can be done. A lot that would take a number of years can be shortened into a very short time. And I think that we just have to make Parkinson's matter in the eyes of the public and the policymakers, because we have a really strong research community that's ready to work,
Yeah.
and has been working, you know, on our behalf. And with the power of collaboration and adequate funding, I think we can get to that end. So that gives me hope, because I'm really seeing it move forward in that direction.
Yeah, really, really well said. And, you know, like you, I talked to a lot of people in the medical community who, you know, who say, look, we're getting close, and more collaboration is going to help us get, you know, even closer more quickly. I think that's really vital. And I appreciate you naming it. A lot of people who read PDYs or watch interviews like this one are newly diagnosed, or they're just getting on the sort of Parkinson's road. And so I want to maybe end today by asking you if you could say one or two things to your newly diagnosed self, given what you know now, 22 years later, what would they be?
The first thing I would say is, don't fear the future. One thing that stuck with me that Michael J. Fox said once is that if you worry about something and it happens, then you worry twice as much. And if you worry about something and it doesn't happen, then you worry for nothing. So because this is a disease we can't predict, if you continuously focus on the future and potential disability and don't really live in the moment, then you don't enjoy the joys that the present can bring. So I would tell myself not to worry so much about the future. It'll work out. You know, you'll attend to those challenges when they come. And the second thing I would probably tell my newly diagnosed self is that you can do this, that you will find the strength and perseverance to make it through with the support of the community, with the support of your family. You know, you will make it through, and you've got this. You can do this.
Yeah, well said. And, you know, such wisdom. I remind myself, and I say to others, you know, today is what we have. And if we focus on today and let tomorrow come tomorrow, maybe that's a good approach to life, whether we have Parkinson's or not. That's certainly, the illness has certainly taught me that, if nothing else.
Absolutely.
Well, I could talk to you forever. I really admire you and appreciate you. Thank you for all your work, and advocacy, and just for being a kind and generous human. Thanks for spending time with us today on PD Wise. And
My pleasure, Allan.
forward
And
to
thank you
having
for all the good work you're doing. I'm really impressed. And I so loved the book that you wrote just recently. It's really a remarkable guiding document, really, for people that are involved with others and with PD in the community. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sonia. I wish you well. Take care. Talk to you soon.
Bye.